Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Mage, Errant, Book 7, The Last Echo of the Lord of Bells. Chapters 30 through 34, but also 29. In this episode, we get to see a lot of people fighting, a lot of badass shit, but let's be real, mostly what we're here for is Talia's parents. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. What's up, Dan? Dan is so patient as I am showing up late. You guys, this was such a fun section. It's like the kind of thing that I really am inspired by when I read a battle scene, and this is true of Cradle as well, and also would turn up a lot in the Grisha series by Lee Bardugo. When you have a battle going on and the storyteller has to give you the info of what's going on with everybody at once and how tricky that can be. And I don't feel like it comes up a lot in this section in this book, but there's something that Cradle and Lee Bardugo has done, which they will have a really big moment with the battle happen with one person, and then when she jumps to a different POV, you will see them noticing that moment to give you an idea of the timing and how it lines up with everybody. Those usually happen when people are in close proximity and what they're doing affects one another in a really immediate way. This battle, everybody is so spread out and in totally different areas that while they may affect each other depending on the size of the spell they're using, it's not necessarily going to overlap. So, but yeah, I really it's so easy for what should be an exciting battle scene to turn kind of tedious, I guess. And I felt like I was totally engaged for this whole section. This was a bit of a problem for me with the final Cradle book. The battle against the big bad in that one it goes on a little while too long for me. And I had this happen with a lot of bad action movies are this way. I'm sure you guys know what I mean, where something just has so many explosions, so many car chases or gunfire or whatever, that you just start to get numb and to almost tune it out because it's overwhelming. And I always feel so sad when that happens because I'm sure all of that takes so much effort and time to coordinate, so much money to make it look good. When you go too hard, it's just sort of like, oh God, okay, can we just, Oh my God, you guys. Sorry, Dan is in the chat. He says John Wick 4 got exhausting at the staircase, if you've seen that. I will agree with you, but I'm going to add a caveat, which is that felt totally intentional to me. And one can argue whether or not that's a good thing, whether they should have intended that. You know what I mean? But it was a case of me feeling like, oh God, this does seem like it's on purpose. Like we're supposed to be kind of like Jesus by this point, but I can see myself rewatching that scene and getting kind of impatient with it. So I will agree on that. The one that comes to mind for me is the Tom Holland joint Uncharted, based on the video game, I think it was. And the ending of that movie is it's a climax that's 27 minutes long. And it's nothing but explosions and gunfire and falling out of planes and then landing on another plane and then falling to a helicopter. And then, there's just so much and it goes on forever. So that's a real bad action movie. I'm sorry, Tom. I love you, but no. So let's, I'm going to have to really, really manage my time here because I have to fit in an extra chapter since I ran over last time. But, chapter 29, Take the Plunge, is the one that I had mentioned where our friends are just heading down. And the whole vibe of this is really like standing, waiting to deploy out of the back of like a carrier, some kind of aircraft, everybody lined up with their like, their parachutes on and feeling their nerves, but trying to keep everything under control so that we can focus and be ready. And there's just a real sense at the start of this. Godric is having a lot of misgivings about whether this is going to be something that they can even succeed in doing. Godric said, "I'm not sure whether we should be hoping for a lesson to succeed or fail at bringing down Havath's defenses. He fails, we just get to fly away." Sabe and Talia both gave him wry looks, and he knew that it wouldn't be nearly so simple, that they'd have to resume their hunt for a lesson without the advantage of knowing where he would be at a specific date and time. Plus, they were only partially sure their plan for retrieving the Tongue Eater from Alustin would work. This was something I was wondering about. Candaron had put a lot of work into securing the storage tattoo she gave the librarians Errant, and normally it wouldn't be at all possible to break into one in the time they had. It was only Alustin's own tricks that were giving them a chance, and that chance was a slim one. And I do not know what that means, like his own tricks. You know, I'm wondering if it's like something to do with the way their tattoos work. I know that he has his setup in such a way that he can make it look like he's reaching into a bag, but I don't know how that would factor in, so I'm not sure that's the thing they mean. But yeah, I was really wondering, like, when you die, does everything in your storage space just suddenly appear beside you because your mana is no longer sustaining the connection to the space? Or does it just like shut down and disappear forever because you were keeping that connection, and so now it's basically like walled over and there's no way to get to it? Like, I really don't know how that goes. So Godric is wishing that they weren't in the vanguard, but that's too bad for you, buddy. You guys are pretty tough. You've made a reputation for yourselves, and now you're just going to have to deal with it. So, this is when we have Alustin talking, and the mention of bureaucracy, and it's really funny. Ilinia cut off as explosions began blooming all over Havath City. The windshield and the city ward simply collapsed, which really is beautiful timing for them. Like, you couldn't have coordinated this better on purpose. And we get the countdown. He's breathing, and he jumps, or drops. Jumping, I keep sort of picturing it, like I said, as if he's in an aircraft, which isn't exactly it. It's just dropping. So he's falling. Far below him, the falling ship seemed to slow. Godric knew they weren't slowing, that they'd simply hit terminal velocity while Godric was still accelerating. But the entire concept of terminal velocity was deeply counterintuitive to him. He understood the standard explanations flyers gave about gravity and air pressure, but it just made no sense to his gut. So he's continuing to fall, and his ears are pounding with his like heartbeats. And he looks over at his friends. Sabe wore a look of razor-focused determination. Talia, her scrimshaw ward aglow, seemed torn between joy and terror. And Hugh, who for once just seemed calm as the storm ward's crown spun around him. He shifted his gaze farther away to Ilinia, outpacing all of them as she fell, to shimmering Cardivan, whose ridiculous cape fluttered in the wind behind them, but whose light magic had dimmed the usual luminescence of their barrel armor. to Rhodes Carax in full disguise as the Frost Ghost, his ice armor larger than ever as he plummeted surrounded by a dozen spears, an enchanted spearhead already fitted into his new Sky Spear staff. And they finally are approaching the ground. Godric and his friends join with the same group as Shimmering Cardivan, 5 fiber mages in airtight wingsuits, and a water mage particularly dexterous with her control, a gravity mage in enchanted full plate, and a handful of other battle mages. A few seconds after the group split off, a colossal lightning bolt screamed past their group, incinerating one of the fiber mages. At least a dozen other equally huge lightning bolts raced upward. Oh boy. Lightning attacks are just really like, I mean, that's a classic, right? It's just good shit. So they're having to dodge all of this as they're landing. Godric almost got to find out whether his armor could have survived superheated steam when one of the ice bombs headed straight for their group. Shimmering Cardivan stepped in to save the day, blasting the ice bomb into dust and scattering it across the sky with a powerful burst of sound magic. So then we have tons and tons of firebolts, which are just, again, a classic. And the last part of the drop was the most chaotic single minute of Godric's life. He uses his magic to deflect one of the bombs. Godric should have been slowing his fall at least twice as high up as he was now. So he just manages to like stay alive as he lands. But his armor, it's like the only thing that's keeping him from being fucking broken. The wave of shrapnel his impact sent scything out did cut down a half dozen Havathi soldiers, though. There is something about that. It's like he cannonballed into a pool and just got everybody like lounging in the sun wet, you know? And he's like sunk in up to his knees, I think, into the ground. So I'm trying to find the sinking up to his waist. Oh my God. I didn't even realize how deep he went. So we get a note about everybody and how they're coming down. Sabe comes down like lightning. Talia comes down gracefully and slowly with a sort of like, there's a dread to her that I love. And then Hugh came down slower than the others. The other members of their descent group were safely contained within, and the scattered resistance from the plaza failed to breach or even harm any of the ward segments. The battle mages Hugh carried launched their own battle spells, but Hugh's wardstone projectiles stole the show as he magically launched them down with crystal magic, precisely showering explosions among the few surviving groups. His green crystal eyes seemed to glow from the inside, and the usually nervous, forgettable-looking mage looked like some dispassionate, powerful archmage who had decided that annihilation was simply the most convenient way to deal with a minor problem. I just love this. Like, I know I shouldn't be cheering on I have a bloodthirsty nature, you guys. I just kind of do. Like, I've grown to sort of understand this about myself. And I don't want Hugh to become somebody who doesn't throw up every time he kills somebody. I like the fact that that people's lives matter enough that it always hits him. However, I can't help but just be like, look, he can be that way in private. Keep this up for the public, though. Like, you've got a reputation. You've got to look like, you know, maybe it's just dissociation. Who knows? But this, even Mackerel had decided to make an entrance. He raced into the plaza as fast as Godric had ever seen him move, sending enemy mages and equipment flying broken into the air as he rammed through them. A couple times as he passed, he bombarded Havathi mages with the force and frost blast from his enchanted strap. A swarm of green crystal pages followed behind him, slicing like swords through anything the spellbook didn't batter aside. Which, later on, Hugh is like, since when the fuck have you been able to do that? And I love it. Mackerel's like, well, I mean, it's just the same as you shooting your teeth out of your mouth. And he was like, we can't do that. What are you talking about? And Mackerel's like, oh my God, you can't? Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. And he was like, no, don't you. I mean, it's very, very fun. I really enjoyed this. So then we go to Hugh's POV, and he is pretty much as cool as a cucumber for like the first 2 paragraphs. He made the spell form alterations, made sure all his friends had landed, then looked over the ruin they made of the plaza. Then he bent over and promptly vomited. You know, Hugh, this is all I wish for you. Stay this person, but create some sort of ward that is just you holding that cold stare so that all people can see is you apparently being really cold-blooded while actually you're vomiting. Like, you know, just a kind of illusion to maintain this vibe. And I love that Talia's parents are like, we need to cure him of that. We can't have him vomiting every time he kills someone, which I thought was going to be about how, like, you've got to toughen up, boy. But it's really about, like, well, you know, his throat and mouth, that's going to fuck his throat up if he throws up all the time. He's in a battle. This is going to, and I was like, you know what? They're not wrong. Like, anybody who has struggled with bulimia knows that shit will fuck up your whole upstairs system. So I'm sorry. The parents, they're so good. They're not supposed to be here. And he's like, what are you even doing here? Oh, we couldn't stay away. We missed Talia's first few large-scale battles. We felt terrible about it. Just terrible. Absentee parents. You can only imagine what the neighboring clans might think. In part because we'd burn them alive if they insulted our family. But still, you don't like to think of others finding your parenting lacking. You really don't. Oh my God. So yeah, it turns out they're here with Sabe's help, and she's like, sorry, but she's like smirking to herself. So he goes over and sees Godric and is like, that was insane, Godric. You were like a meteor. You know, you're kind of terrifying, right? And I'm reading this like, Hugh, do you, like, it's like he's just so disconnected from the impression that he gives. And indeed, Godric replies immediately with, you're one to talk. So I really, Hugh, I wish that somebody would like take video and show it to him so that he could see, you know, because this is the kind of thing that can be really startling. Like, you think you know the way that you come across, and it can be for good or ill. Just, you know, to really clarify this, I had this happen once where I got in an argument with my ex-husband on a recording, and it was an argument that actually had like some real life relevance. And so it was a bit more heated than we would normally get. And I made a cutting remark, but in the heat of the moment, it just felt like, yeah, well, fuck you. And then like a week later, I'm editing the episode and I heard it and I was like, wow, that was so bitchy. Holy, that was like out of line. But I needed time and distance to just hear it without the emotion attached to realize like, ooh, I thought I was being like kind of funny. That wasn't funny. That was mean. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like Hugh thinks, oh my God, I'm so nervous and I'm barely know what I'm doing sometimes and I'm holding it together by a thread and everybody can tell. And I'm like, dude, no, they cannot. Like maybe the people who know you best, but even them, I mean, it's like not a lot of people know him better than Godric, and Godric is over here like, he is scary right now. So they split up, and they have to like approach different areas that everybody's looking, of course, for Alustin first thing. And Alinea is out here. She's like, as Godric points out, she is trying to melt lightning weapons with more lightning, which seems absurd, but does end up working. She loves doing that sort of thing. Electrocuting lightning mages, suffocating wind mages, drowning water mages. It's a ridiculous habit. Delightfully intimidating, though, said Talia. Of course she would say that. So they talk about how their reservoirs are doing, and then it's time for Mackerel and Godric to try and trace Alustin. Godric has no luck, but eventually Mackerel does. And this is interesting. They have sort of figured out that what Alustin's likely doing is using a labyrinth stone. And because Mackerel basically is a labyrinth, they're thinking that maybe there's a way around the anti-scrying that Alustin's stone is capable of. So it does work. He points over to the edge of the city where Alustin's forces had landed. And he was like, well, that's good, I guess. And they talk about whether they should keep hiding what they're truly capable of. And they decide that they need to be chill until they find Alustin. Once they have engaged with him, they're just going to let loose. But for the moment, they're going to continue to kind of cover what they actually can do. And then this is when Heliothrax arrives. And you guys, I'm just going to jump into what the fuck is up with Heliothrax, because I was right in my guess in a very like basic way that, you know, there's scraps of meat and whatnot, and that she's taking pieces of other dragons to like, but I was really optimistic in thinking that these creatures were dead. And instead, not only are they not dead, they are also still fully conscious. Which, like, it would be one thing if you kept a heart pumping, but the mind that had been attached to that heart was gone. No, though. She can't just keep the living. She has to keep the consciousness, because I think that's what links their magic to her. Which is so hideous and horrifying. And it's really kind of fascinating to read this being done by like a magical creature, because I feel like there's such a trope in fiction that like anything that isn't a person that's like, you know, some sort of animal is going to be more connected to nature in a way that they view certain things as a taboo in a way that human beings don't. Like, it's just a tendency to make people be the monsters in when it comes to certain practices, and anything that is more connected to the natural world. And I use that in quotes because there's no real reason why dragons should be more connected to the natural world, except that, you know, they are by their nature animals, and so it feels like they should be that way. But humans are also but you get what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So this sort of thing, you know, you could see this being done in a lot of stories actually by a person, like a human being capturing dragons and doing this horrible thing and using this animal in a really, like, there's being a superiority to it that is so cold and heartless, but also there's the sort of distance between what a human being is and what a dragon is that would make you see, well, he doesn't see these things as being equal to himself because he has like a superiority. And to have it be another dragon doing this to dragons, and of course there's still that element of superiority, but it isn't based on species. And also the fact that there is no attempt at hiding it. Heliothrax is not like concerned about the reputation that she is going to have after doing this. In fact, one could argue the only thing that could come of this is her reputation being even more terrifying, you know, which I have to admit, I find her scarier now. So yeah. It's just a really interesting subversion of a trope that I'm very used to. And it's like for good reason, you know, human beings tend to be extremely destructive, very disrespectful of natural resources and the lives of animals. And I can say this even though I am somebody who eats meat, wears leather, you know, like I definitely do not have a problem with the concept of killing animals for survival, but I certainly have an issue with the way that we do it in the modern world. So, you know, you have to figure out how to live with that. But the fact that human beings tend to be the ones to do this monstrous stuff just makes it so that I'm kind of like unconsciously assuming there's a line that won't be crossed for a character like Heliothrax. And so finding out the way that this is, and I'm not at the spot yet where, because it's from Alinia's point of view that we actually find out what it is that she has done. And Alinia describes what Heliothrax looks like. I'm not there yet, but I will be reading that because it's so disturbing. So anyway, we go into Valia's POV. And I love this. The section was like highlighted here and I was like, interesting. Valia is thinking about Alustin's scrying and how they've just never been able to break it. And it says, they developed the ward detection method for his students, but Alustin didn't rely on wards to any comparable degree as the Storm Ward, the Flea, Hammerbreaker, and the Nightmare. And I am cackling at the fact that Sabe is called the Flea. She's going to hate it if she finds out. I don't know if she knows about this already. I don't recall if it's been mentioned, but it really, I have been talking to you guys whenever I'm binging a particular show that's like an old classic comfort to me. It's always like foremost in my mind when I talk about anything. And there's a point when Booth first meets Bones in the show Bones, where he describes having like reflexes like a cat or something like that. And Bones says, while a cat's reflexes are faster than a human being's, if you want to choose an animal that represents the pinnacle of speed and reflexes, really you should say faster than a flea. And he's like, well, that's not what, no. And then later in the series, like literally 10 seasons later, he's bragging about something and calls himself as fast as a flea. And I was just kind of delighted by that little callback. So the thing with her isn't that she is as fast, like the speed is certainly an aspect of it, but really this is meant to reference her jumping and the way that she is able to like move quickly through space, not necessarily her movements while standing still. It's like the actual physical change of positioning of her body. Emic Shard says, the Flea as a name turned up in the battle in Ithos or maybe Skyhold. It felt like vaguely familiar, but I couldn't remember. But thank you. And yeah, Miss T, the Nightmare is such an amazing name. I think this hits for me because I am somebody who suffers from nightmares constantly. Like I have them all the time. And so that is a real, they're just, in my opinion, dreaming is a real fucking racket. Like, our brain is just so bad at processing shit that even when we're asleep, we've got to suffer through this. And then maybe sometimes it'll make our anxiety worse because we wake up upset because we think a thing has happened that hasn't. Or we wake up thinking we've just already gotten up and gotten ready for work. But no, that was all a dream. You know, and yeah, it's interesting that like with everything that Talia can do, it's not like she has, like she uses Dreamfire as a weapon a ton, but the fact that the fire has really taken a back seat in terms of what she's known for, I just think that's really like interesting, you know? So this is the whole thing with them. And of course, Storm Ward, after the mention though, of how like Storm is in everybody's names and it's a little bit tired, I can't help but sort of laugh. And Hammerbreaker, we already knew that one. So, but yeah, this is a fun one. I really enjoy getting to find out the names that, it's too bad that you can't like come up with your own. I mean, you can, but it's really a 50-50 on whether or not it's going to stick. Like Rhodes got pretty lucky with the Frost Ghost. He did that and it became a thing. Not as much of a thing as he hoped because these people did not know who he was, but you get what I mean. So anyway, there were literally hundreds of hidden observation posts scattered throughout the city at key points, each with multiple watchers and magical communication methods. Whatever Alustin's methods were, they didn't obscure simple ordinary eyesight. And we find out that Valia had like a vague, when he mentions bureaucracy, it's like sort of tickling at her memory, but she doesn't quite still understand how he pulled off what he did. And she keeps having to get her people focused because they are just all wanting to get like sidetracked going after different enemies. And she has to remind them over and over, if we don't kill Alustin, killing that person doesn't matter. If we don't handle Alustin first, none of this is going to have any impact. Like, and they know she's right. They're obedient, but it is difficult to have to tell them repeatedly to fucking stay on task. And then we go to Kandaron very briefly, who gets news from Kiata. And this is like, mostly all that it is Kiata being like, hey, thought you would want to know that the battle has begun. Your students are in the middle of it. The Chitin Wand is in play. And Kandaron is like, the Chitin Wand as a weapon? Compared to the Tongue Eater, like, what is that about? And I'm trying to find it. The Labyrinth Builders had gone extinct eons ago, long before any extant sentient race in the known multiverse had even been born. Long before the Kyrene had ever migrated into these regions of reality. Still, most who had the rare opportunity to study the Chitin Wands believed they were meant to interact with the Labyrinth in some way, even control them. None had ever succeeded in using them that way, though. Frankly, the Chitin Wand made a mediocre city destroyer at best. It made little sense why Alustin would grab it as well as the Tongue Eater. He intended the Chitin Wand not as a weapon, but as fuel, the means to provide sufficient mana to shatter the Tongue Eater. She had wondered how he had intended to destroy it. Never doubted, but wondered. And there's a part of me that's like relieved to hear that that is the intent, because I was thinking in it being mentioned like, oh, it's used to control labyrinths, that it was going to be used to control Mackerel somehow. And that he was finding another way to sort of like, you know, backdoor into the software so that he could fuck with Hugh. And while arguably using it to destroy the Tongue Eater is objectively a worse thing to be using it for, it's so much less personal that I find it less upsetting. And Kiata she's like, why are you telling me this? I can't do anything about it. And Kiata is like, no, yeah, I know that, but you can't remain an observer forever. Why not join the expansionists then? They claim a multiversal empire is the best means of resistance. You have never shared my opposition to imperial ambitions. No, I haven't. This is Kiata responding. I don't care in the slightest how ephemerals are governed, only that they are. And such disdain for the short-lived would seem to make you an ideal recruit for the expansionists, so why oppose them and why now? It is simple. They are weak. They falter. Their conquests fail again and again to relentless opposition. Even those empires they do establish are toppled again and again, whether by outside catastrophe, rebellions like your own, or simple corruption. I cannot flee the future, so if I must fight it, I will do so. Kindness is why I contacted you. Odds are you will lose someone today. I would not do you the cruelty of leaving you in ignorance. Some would call it cruelty to offer knowledge when there's nothing that can be done. The ephemeral perhaps might say that, but for those of us who will live millennia, there are few curses greater than ignorance and uncertainty. Pets come and go. We remain. And then Kiata bails. And she's just kind of like, that is really gross. A pet. Ew. She wants to say something, but he's already gone. Kandaron abandoned any pretense of work and curled up around her worries over her warlock. And there was something I liked about that she, doesn't just continue to power through it, because it's very easy to just write a character as being powerful and strong and be like, oh, they're so strong, they don't let grief interrupt their goals and their work. But realistically, that is not a great way to be. It sounds like it is in an abstract way, but when you look at like the trying to be like a healthful, balanced person, that's actually not awesome. So I was sort of like pleased that she is given this moment to just wallow a little bit, because that's only fair. I don't think wallowing is inherently a bad thing. I think it's necessary. It's just very difficult sometimes when you started to get out of it again. And that's where you get a little bit tricky. So then we go to chapter 32. And we're in Alinia's POV here. And Alinia, it's her POV that we are in when we find out what the deal is with Heliothrax. This whole thing, it's wild because she's having to fight in 3 directions. And I don't know if I've ever seen, I'm sure that there's like something that when you guys point it out, I'll be like, oh yeah. But I don't think I've ever seen a like hand-to-hand fight between 3 characters who all are after their own interests and not sort of allied in one direction or another, so that 2 against 1 becomes the thing. So it's really fascinating here to read this moment where it's like everybody is fighting against one another in a way that is so difficult to manage, because this kind of 3-way fight is so rare that everybody is just sort of overwhelmed a little bit. But yeah, so she is in the midst of this fight, and Andis Thune finally chimes in. 100 perfect copies of Andis Thune rippled into existence, lunging at one foe or another. Nearly all of them dodged instinctively, throwing their foes into disarray for just a moment. Alinia used that moment well, not to launch an assault, but to build herself a storm body, to finally stop having to dodge wildly around the battlefield like her granddaughter, which I did think was some unnecessary shade, but fine, Alinia, I guess. Heliothrax's attention was briefly caught by Andis Thune as she rose, but the sunworm wasn't so far in the grasp of her rage that she would be fool enough to hunt an illusionist while faced with a more direct foe. Alinia took that brief pause to finally get a good, clear look at what Heliothrax had done to herself. And she is indisputably the biggest dragon there is now. Where once Heliothrax had been a slender, graceful creature, now she was a bloated, vile, ungainly thing. She must have at least doubled her own mass. Ilinia was absolutely convinced it was no longer possible for the dragon to support herself in the air merely with her own wings. She'd wager quite a lot that Heliathrax was supporting the bulk of her weight with magic, which was probably why Ilinia had been able to keep ahead of her in the air so easily. The modifications Heliathrax had made seemed to have slowed her flight significantly. No longer was Heliathrax likely the fastest flyer short of a Thunderbringer. If Heliathrax had simply bulked up her own body, that would be one thing, but the reality was far worse. She had used the bodies of other dragons to increase her mass. Red, green, and blue scales interlocked with her own mother-of-pearl scales. The spines of lesser dragons ran across her flanks like inflamed scars. A half-dozen other dragon tails twined and wrapped around the sunworm's own. Multiple sets of lesser wings projected out behind her 4 massive wings. Several limbs clawed and grasped at the air, projecting at freakish angles from Heliathrax's torso. And I was like, all I could think of with this is Envy from the oh my god, you guys know what I'm talking. Well, some of you may know the anime Full Metal Alchemist. That's the one, which I was commissioned to cover, and which was really a ride. But Envy, for those unfamiliar, their true form is a bizarre amalgam of people's body parts in a way that's so like animated so grotesquely. I would not have thought it would be possible to animate something to be probably as disturbing as it would be if it were like live action, but I feel like I can say it's really bad. And so this is what that kept reminding me of. The worst part, though, was that the dragons Heliathrax had harvested were still alive and aware. And you guys, it was like, I'm listening to this, and I'm like, oh, she's enhanced herself with parts of other dragons. That is what I thought. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm getting to this part, that Dan was like, what she did is so fucked up from, like, last episode. And I was like, as much as this is a really gross, monstrous thing to do, I feel like Dan's tone implied it was at another level. And then when it said the worst part, though, immediately I went, oh my God, they're still alive. Like, I just knew. And then that's the next sentence. Their heads were bound along the sides of Heliathrax's own spine in a staggered pattern from her head down her neck and back. Though half submerged in mother-of-pearl flesh, Ilinia could see their eyes rolling in pain and terror, trapped in a nightmarish existence no creature deserved. That's so dark. Like, that's really rough. Ilinia, though, you've really let yourself go, Sunworm. Pity. You used to be so graceful. Power does what power must, Kaendas. If I must descend to the levels of my enemies to defeat them, so be it. Pfft, my level? Please. I might be many unflattering things, but would you like to know one thing I'm not? And what is that? Anywhere near as ugly as you, Ilinia replied, then laughed again. It was delightful how effective childish taunts could be against the beings capable of leveling entire cities. And this is the point where she's like, all right, come at me, bro. But she has not fully appreciated, like, what's happening here. Mid-flight, the heads bound along Heliathrax's spine began to twitch and convulse, their jaws flexing as they tried to scream through throats no longer connected to lungs. Ilinia sensed massive amounts of mana being drained from the ether. And then magic began to erupt from Heliathrax. Not just solar or dragon affinities, magic from more affinities than Ilinia could count. Heliathrax hadn't just bound the flesh of the dragons she'd harvested, she'd bound their magic to her as well, found some way to control what should be impossible to control. And she basically comes at Ilinia with everything she's got. And I'm not going to get into all of it, but there's like hundreds of spells heading in her direction. Ilinia braced her storm body for impact. Oh, bugger, Ilinia said. And that is the end of chapter 32. So then we go to 33, and we are with Luthi, who it turns out has been inducted in the Hidden Clan because he is not as rash as the rest of his family. So he's the first from Clan Castus in a while to have been inducted. No one was born to the clan, and it held no lands. It was an elite force of mages recruited from across the mountain clans, dedicated to keeping them all free and unruled by great powers or nations. Rana wasn't just a member. She was a member of Clan Darum. She was a member of the Hidden Clan and had assassinated at least 2 archmages in her youth who threatened the clans. She'd also been the one to recruit Luthi. And let's see, I'm trying to, because I'm keeping an eye on my time, and I really only got like 15 minutes left. So I'm trying to make sure that I've got adequate time to spend on Talia's parents, who really need some time. They just do. Sadly, they wouldn't have time for a group of a full 128 fire mages. It would take more than 3 times as long to summon the resulting elemental colossus as it had taken for the phoenix, and they were already fast approaching the ground. And I was like, the what now? I want to hear about this. One of these years, they'd figure out how to make the circle of 256 work. And when that happened, well... And I just immediately, my brain went, it's over for you, hoes. Just wait. When I'm able to summon this fire elemental, it is over for you, hoes. It was enough to say they wouldn't have needed any allies to stop Alustin, nor to destroy Havath City, or even a second spell. As the immense flattened Hydra corkscrewed his way down to the ground, the army on his back readying themselves for battle, Luthi's pyromaniacal laughter made Rana, not for the first time, second-guess her decision to induct him into the Hidden Clan. So, MX Shard says that line earlier about how there aren't many armies marching purely for destruction and no record of armies opposing another's invasion methods while being fine with the invasion itself. Yeah, it's a real weird situation. And Dan says, I love that their summoning magic works like binary. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. I didn't even put that together, but yeah. So, okay, this is when we're with Talia's parents. We are in the POV of Lieutenant Anders Baltus. Lieutenant Anders Baltus gaped in utter befuddlement at the hand-holding middle-aged couple, no taller than Anders' chest, who had just wandered right into the intersection where his siege mages and soldiers were stationed. What a cute little cafe, dear. It's delightful. I wish it were open. Maybe if we're lucky, it'll survive the battle and we can come back and visit in the future. Oh, I'd like that. Why don't we have any cute cafes back home? It would rather ruin our reputation if our hold had an adorable little cafe, wouldn't it? Yes, but it's Luthi's problem now, not ours, isn't it? And you know we could convince the clan elders we need a cafe. They'd love it. Probably take all the good tables gossiping all day. Oh, I can just see it now. Anders finally shook off his bewilderment. What are you doing here? Well, we were visiting with some friends, but they had an appointment a few blocks that way, so we thought we'd explore a bit while they took care of business. Surrender now or be destroyed, Anders called in his strongest voice, which unfortunately wasn't that strong, and actually cracked a bit at the end. Try not to damage the cafe. I'll do my best, dear. And then, in a blur of motion, the middle-aged woman drew the ridiculous greatsword from her back and was shooting across the intersection into Anders' troops. That wasn't a figure of speech. The woman was literally shooting across the battlefield. The bizarre metal nozzles on her armor erupted with jets of flame so powerful they launched her forward faster than a force mage could leap. Her greatsword, powered by more jets of flame, sliced entirely through 3 soldiers without even slowing. And then the woman pivoted on a coin, dodging a boulder and several crossbow bolts, and vanished among Anders' troops, though the explosions and severed limbs coming from her direction gave Anders a rough idea of where she was. Then, remembering the man, Anders whirled back, expecting another bloody swath of destruction. Instead, he was greeted by the sight of the man just standing there peacefully, puffing on his pipe. Several of Anders' soldiers had their crossbows and swords pointed at him, and an ice mage levitated a dozen icicles, ready to impale the man if he made a single wrong move. "We have him, sir," the ice mage called, her voice almost as nervous as Anders. "Do you now, lass?" the man asked, then took an especially deep inhale on his pipe. Anders had only a heartbeat to notice the ember was getting much brighter than it should. And then it launched itself out of the pipe's bowl even faster than the woman had moved. Anders didn't know it, but the man had waited precisely for the ice mage to blink to launch the ember, and before the blink had even finished, the ember had gone right through the center of the ice mage's forehead and out the back of her skull. It didn't stop, or even slow. In a single disorienting breath, carving a painful streak of light across the lieutenant's vision, the ember traveled through his soldiers one after another as though they weren't even there, even melting holes in enchanted steel breastplate like it was cutting through butter. Before the first falling weapon, spell, or body hit the ground, the ember was already racing through Anders' troops, punching through siege mages and ballistae with as much ease. Ballistae? I don't remember ever how, I never get that right. In a few heartbeats, it was over. The woman cut down the last siege mage, and the man's flying ember puffed away into smoke as it finished destroying the last ballista. And you guys, that is just the most insanely badass thing. And what this, the way that I imagine this, if it were on film, is as he says, "Do you now, lass?" Everything goes into slow motion. We see Anders blinking in slow motion. And as his eye closes, we have the ember jump out and fly. And intermittently, it's going through people as we jump back to Anders' eyes, which are slowly opening from the blink again. So that by the time we return to regular speed, all of the people around him are in the middle of falling to the ground, while he's looking around going, "Wait, what?" Because it's just barely registered what happened. And so it would be the kind of scene that would, you would do total justice to how fast this all was, but it would probably take a full 30 seconds to get a good look at how this all worked. And this dude then is like, "I'd killed 32. And the woman's like, "I did 35, so I won." And then she says, "Wait a second. Did you give me a head start?" And she puts Anders on the spot and is like, "Did he?" And he admits, "Yes, your husband did." This is so funny. "You're right, dear. I know it's a bad idea, and it will give someone a chance to get the drop on me one of these days." "What? Don't be ridiculous. I just want to win fair and square. You giving me a head start lets you think that maybe you really could have won the competition if you tried. I want to crush you utterly." And I love that he mistook it for her being concerned for his safety. "Sir, I have known this woman approximately 2 minutes, and I know what she meant. So come on now. Of course it's all about the fact that she's pissed that you're letting her think she won. It's condescending. Let her win in the regular correct way." While Anders stared on in confusion and terror, the couple embraced and started kissing like desperate teenagers. Then, as if nothing had happened and Rose wasn't spattered in blood, they wandered off, hand in hand. I swear to God, you guys, I love this so much. They just leave Anders there. Anders is so worried that they're going to kill him next, and there is something so insulting about the fact that they apparently do not view him as enough of a threat to worry about killing him. It's not even a question. It's not going to happen. And I also just love, this is one of my like personal favorites, is when a writer knows how to write a couple who are really, really into each other. Because this is something that I feel is like, anytime that you're watching a lot, like sitcoms do this a lot, the will they, won't they thing. But of course, dramas are also hugely guilty of this. There's a real sense to it that the writers don't want this couple to get together because then all of the tension would be gone. And frequently that does turn out to be the case. A couple gets together and like all the air goes out of the script. And from then on, it feels so flat and uninteresting. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's just that a lot of people have such dysfunctional relationships that they don't know how to write a couple that's happy and enjoys one another and is supportive of each other and make that interesting and tense in a different way. So I really enjoy getting to see little moments like this because it's so refreshing and fun, you know, and it's become a lot more common. I think that we've reached an era in our social understanding where we realize how gross the like trope of, oh, these people are married, so they must hate each other is. And we're actively trying to fight back against that, you know? And then as they walk away, it wasn't until much later he realized the couple had, somehow without him realizing at all, burnt every hair off the top of his head, leaving him completely bald, which is really so light a punishment. Be grateful, sir. So this is when we go to chapter 34, troop movements. Last of the chapters for this section. So we're with Alustin. Karna's arrival wasn't a moment too soon. Their staging ground was under assault by 3 Havathi great powers, specifically 2 of the intertwined avatars and the Mud King, who had rolled his immense boiling mud armor through Havath's boulevards without leaving even a hint of a stain, which is really remarkable. Later on, when we're in Valia's POV, it turns out that like people are trying to get out of the way, but he is killing some of their own. And she loses a couple of troops. They're the first people she loses to an ally who is not being careful, or maybe her people were just not being careful. But either way, that sucks. Let's see. The temporary defensive field had been constructed to his specifications, but it was rapidly being overwhelmed. They never would have even made it this long without the 3 great powers who had stayed at the landing. Thread Queen Iblant and Sagravak Scalestorm had rushed straight into battle with the Havathi and Coven powers, unfortunately. He'd expected it from Iblant. She hadn't had time to integrate into their command structure, and she'd made it clear from their first contact she fought alongside them, but not actually with him. She had her own specific goals. That was fine by him. Having her there causing mayhem would pull much-needed attention off his forces. Having Sagravax run off so abruptly, however, was a deeply unpleasant surprise. If any of his great powers were intending to run off, he would have expected it to be Matt and Koss, but the teleporting gangster had stuck right by the landing zone, warping out every few seconds to cut away at one of the intertwined with that nasty sword of his, or teleport away a couple tons of boiling mud. Zerse and Grey, meanwhile, kept their landing zone shrouded in a wall of smoke stretching over several neighborhoods, leaving most of the siege mages targeting them blind. Kasser was, of course, the most important part of their defenses. Despite 3 of his affinities and most of his attention being on the stone platforms, he'd been casting a ceaseless rain of spells against attacking powers. His frost bursts were almost invisible. His signature ball lightning had proven a tolerable deterrent against the colossal Lich avatars. The arrival of Karna Scythe would allow Kasser to focus all his own energy on the enemy powers, not to mention Karna herself, unquestionably the most powerful of Alustin's allies. And then a sharpshooter mage's arrow from the top of a palace half a mile away flew through a hole in the landing shield, then punched into one side of his paper helmet and out the other. He had no idea how the sharpshooter mage had even seen him through Zersin's immense wall of smoke. Or rather, how the archer had spotted his paper-armored doppelganger. And I was like, the what now? I was so mad, you guys. There wasn't just one Alustin running around Havath City. There were 4. Of course there are. He can't just have paper copies of himself to start off the echo of the Lord of Bells. No, no, no. He has got to have doppelgangers of himself actually apparently like participating in things and looking like legitimate threats. The doppelganger wasn't the first to be hit. One of his others had been shot by Havathi sharpshooters 3 times. Neither of them had taken any serious harm, though, unlike the paper doppelganger the sacred swordsman had caught. He'd barely even had a chance to glimpse the Havathi warlocks before his armor dissolved under a rain of offensive spells. He hadn't even glimpsed Valia until he scried the location where his armor had been cut down. Her face had been utterly and completely emotionless. You guys, I am not going to lie to you. When I first read this, I rewound because I was like, I feel like this would be a bigger deal. I thought it said Talia. And I was like, oh, dang. I'm glad it wasn't in a way. It was too quick. But yeah. So, and I love Alustin's like, maybe I'll just leave that arrow in there. It's pretty funny. And then he's like, I guess the point of a doppelganger is for people to really believe that it's me. So I won't do that, but it is very funny. And Kasser and Karna didn't even consult with Alustin before launching themselves straight into the battle against the Havathi powers. Kasser began ripping apart the Mud King's armor with all 7 affinities, forcing the armor mage into immediate retreat. Karna used a combination of earthquake magic and her own monstrous physique to propel herself straight at a lich avatar like a ballista bolt. Alustin used one of his mind shards to watch her slam into the giant statue's chest, then with a massive burst of earthquake and stone magic, pushed off against it and launched herself at the second statue, sending both tumbling to the ground, the first with a series of huge cracks across its chest, the second with its right arm badly damaged at the elbow. So we jump over from this whole situation to Raymel the Chain, who has Rana and the other hidden on his back. And we've got Roland. Roland had his official mission straight from his older brother Luthi. He was going to kill one of the Intertwined, along with his standing order to kill Alustin Haber on sight, but he had another mission as well. He was the first member of Clan Cassis to join the Hidden Clan in generations. Roland, however, was different. Oh, that's right, because he's referencing. He was, to those who didn't know him, a terrifying figure covered in scars and carrying nearly as many weapons as his father. To those who did know him, he was generally thought of as the lazy brother. But that was what the Hidden Clan wanted. He was the last member anyone would suspect to be a spy or assassin. The mission to kill the Lich was relatively straightforward. Destroy the right parts of the demesne, bring the whole thing down. It was easier said than done, of course. Luthi himself had killed a draconic Fiber Lich a couple years back. Of course, the Fiber Lich had wanted to die, which is the case now. And I'm really curious about how this is going to go. Let's see. I'm trying to, because I'm like so close to out of time here. They had provided him with extra spatial storage for one solitary purpose. They didn't want him destroying all the target components. They wanted him to sever and retrieve samples of several component types, both from the Lich and the Lich overlap suppressors, which is really interesting. They'd had plenty of time to study Kandaron's liches over the years, and Havath's liches were nearly as advanced, but had followed a wholly different line of magical development. And I'm like extremely, I don't know how much of what they find is going to reveal the fact that these liches were basically being held hostage, So that I'm wondering if that will come through in the samples that they're getting. So then we go back to Valia, and we get the mention of the Mud King and him accidentally killing some of her own people. The fact that communications hadn't collapsed entirely, the fact that the Dominion's army was already recovering and coordinating once more, was an ode to the effectiveness and redundancy of their chain of command. Despite her internal conflict and cracking loyalties, Valia felt nothing but pride for the Dominion army for that. So she is diving in. This is when, again, her people are like, what about if we go after so-and-so? And she's just like, no, guys, you know what we have to do. The amount of effort it would require for the three of you to go toe-to-toe with any great power but a minor one would unacceptably, Lord of mercy, hasten your demise, regardless of whether you won or lost. And they want to argue, but they don't, because these people have some serious training, which I can't help but admire. I appreciate it, Valia cursed, swerving the wrong way down an intersection to avoid the devastation. Then, a moment later, she was forced to swerve again, as a Lustan scale mage, Sagravax, was pursued by Sarkis Vi right into their path, the razor-edged scales and phoenix flame drawing a path of destruction straight through the city. When a gargantuan fire elemental in the shape of another phoenix flew in their path once more, incinerating building after building, Valia refused to swerve, flying straight for a gap in the inferno. She needed to track a Lustan down, whatever it took. And that is the end of the chapter. So I am going to wrap up, but I really, really enjoy this section, and I'm super curious where we're going with all this. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys on Thursday. Thank you, Dan, for commissioning, and thank you, everybody, for coming. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.